With such a broad array of threats facing the United States, the fiscal year 2018 budget request of $37. While our mission will also be focused on advancing the economic interest of the American people, the State Department's primary focus will be to protect our citizens at home and abroad. Our mission is at all times guided by our longstanding values of freedom, democracy, individual liberty, and human dignity. The conviction of our country's founders is enduring, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. As a nation, we hold high the aspiration that all will one day experience the freedoms we have known. In our young administration's foreign policy, we are motivated by the conviction that the more we engage with other nations on issues of security and prosperity, the more we will have opportunities to shape the human rights conditions in those nations. History has shown that the United States leaves a footprint of freedom wherever it goes. Ensuring the security and prosperity of the American people and advancing our values has necessitated difficult decisions in other areas of our budget. The fiscal year 2018 budget request includes substantial funding for many foreign assistance programs under the auspices of USAID and the State Department. But we have made hard choices to reduce funding for other initiatives. Even with reductions in funding, we will continue to be the leader in international development, global health, democracy, and good governance initiatives, as well as humanitarian efforts. If natural disasters or epidemics strike overseas, America will respond with the care and support it always has. And I'm convinced we can maximize the effectiveness of these programs and continue to offer America's helping hand to the world. This budget request also reflects a commitment to ensure every tax dollar spent is aligned with the Department's and USAID's mission-critical objectives. The request focused the State Department and USAID's efforts on missions which deliver the greatest value and opportunity of success for the American people. The State Department and USAID budget increased over 60% from fiscal year 2007, reaching a record high $55.6 billion in fiscal year 2017. Recognizing this rate of increase in funding is not sustainable, the fiscal year 2018 budget request seeks to align the core missions of the State Department with historic funding levels. We believe this budget also represents the interest of the American people, including responsible stewardship of the public's money. I know there is intense interest in prospective State Department and USAID redesign efforts. We have just completed collecting information on our organizational processes and culture through a survey that was made available to every one of our state and USAID colleagues. Over 35,000 surveys were completed, and we also have held in-person listening sessions with approximately 300 individuals to obtain their perspective on what we do and how we do it. I met personally with dozens of team members who spoke candidly about their experiences. From this feedback, we have been able to get a clear overall view of our organization. We have no preconceived outcomes, and our discussions of the goals, priorities, and direction of the State Department and USAID are not token exercises. The principles for our listening sessions and subsequent evaluation of our organization are the same as those which I stated in my confirmation hearing for our foreign policy. For what it is, be honest with ourselves and the American people, follow the facts where they lead us, and hold ourselves accountable. We are still analyzing the feedback we have received, and we expect to release the final findings of the survey soon. From all of this, one thing is certain. I'm listening to what my people tell me are the challenges facing them and how we can produce a more efficient, effective State Department and USAID. And we will work as a team and with the Congress to improve both organizations. Throughout my career, I have never believed, nor have I ever experienced, that the level of funding devoted to a goal is the most important factor in achieving it. Our budget will never determine our ability to be effective. Our people will. My colleagues at the State Department and USAID are a deep source of inspiration, and their patriotism, professionalism, and willingness to make sacrifices for our country are our greatest resource. I am confident that the U.S. State Department and USAID will continue to deliver results for the American people. I thank you for your time, and I'm happy now to answer your questions.
Well, thank you. I'm going to use just a portion of my time, I think. If you could, since there will be an appropriations process that's underway soon, when do you expect to have your thoughts together on how the State Department itself will be reorganized?
Well, Senator, as I indicated, we've just completed an important listening phase.
Right.
I've had an initial readout. I'll get a final report. I'm interviewing a couple of individuals who will come in and help us now with the next stage, which is the redesign effort itself, which will involve the colleagues in the State Department and USAID. That effort likely will have that framed over the course of the summer. The effort itself will likely get underway sometime in August-September timeframe when we have our pathway forward, the process, how we want to engage our colleagues, how we want to get at various elements and themes that emerged from the listening session. Some of this is work process. Some of it is how we handle people. Some of it is how decisions are made. It's a very broad set of issues, which were quite informative. So we've got to map out how do we want to get at each of those. But the work itself will start towards the end of the year. Hopefully, we will have some clarity around what that looks like by the end of this year. Early next year, we would begin implementation.
And when you say this year, you mean this fiscal year?
This calendar year.
Calendar year.
Sorry.
So we're likely, as we move through the appropriations process, likely not to have the benefit of that effort. It'll take place after the appropriations for this next year are in place. I know it's sometimes hard for State Department employees to speak, if you will, truth to power when people are sitting there talking with them about the future and sometimes their future. Can you give us some general contours of what, as you're talking with folks, you're hearing from them relative to the actual State Department operations?
I'd be happy to. Several themes emerged, and I think the overarching theme, obviously, though, is the extraordinary dedication, patriotism of the men and women in the State Department and USAID and why they undertake a career like this. And that is a strength that we will build upon. What we heard from a number of people is they are dedicated to this broad mission of representing America's interest around the world. But from time to time, not just now, but historically as well, there have been mixed messages within the department, between the department and USAID, between the State Department and embassies, missions themselves. So greater clarity around how the mission is defined and how direction is given. There are significant layering of work processes and approvals required to deliver on mission. Some of these are imposed by State Department procedures and rules. Some of them are imposed by the Congress in how appropriations and programs are established and approved. All well intended to monitor and ensure that we're delivering on what we've been asked to deliver, but it does create a number of duplicative layers that create real obstacles for people to deliver on mission, and it adds cost, obviously. We also heard a theme that they do not feel that people are held accountable for their work in the State Department, that poor performers are not dealt with. And, you know, the people in the State Department know who's getting the work done and who's not getting the work done. And it's demoralizing to them when they see that we don't deal with those who are not delivering on their responsibilities. That gets to how we praise performance, how we give people feedback, how we work to improve their performance. So we have a number of human resources processes that we believe can be improved and a number of leadership areas that need to be addressed. So most of the themes have to do with, and this was the nature, though, of what we wanted to engage people with, is not, you know, is this the right objective or these the right organizational boxes? Tell us how you get your work done and tell us what gets in the way of you getting your work done and what frustrates you, because that translates to inefficiency and ineffectiveness. As I said, we have no preconceived notions going in. It would have been very easy to approach this, take the organization chart, start collapsing boxes, start making it flatter in an uninformed way. I don't have any number in mind as to what the efficiency will be, whether it's going to be 10%, whether it's going to be 25, 30. we're going to let the redesign drive what those efficiencies will be. That's my experience in doing this in very large organizations, both in the private sector where I've taken a similar approach. At the end of it, we capture significant efficiencies, but let's let the work of the redesign drive that, not go in and say, I'm looking for 20%, because those generally are not sustainable changes then.
So much of that we can deal with, by the way, with the State Department authorization. I will say we're moving along. I know Senator Cardin and I have a meeting today, but many of the things you just addressed, I know in the last administration, they began to see the State Department authorization process as a tool for them to help cause the department to run better, and I hope you'll work with us in that regard. I'm going to reserve my last 37 seconds for an interjection at some point, but thank you, Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on the this reorganization and your desire to make sure you work with Congress on that, because I think the Chairman raises a good point. We're working on a State Department authorization, which we're the authorizing committees. We may have some views. It may be consistent or may be inconsistent, but we're the policy arm, so we do that. The appropriators are going to pass a budget. They're going to do that. And that budget may very well be consistent or inconsistent with the way that you're moving forward. So if we don't have that update, we've asked for an update, and I understand you're in a process. And our staff, nor myself, have been given any briefings as to how the reorganization is coming along. So let me just give you one practical example. You couldn't remove the ambassador on trafficking because that's set up by statute. But you could remove the ambassador on gender issues because that's not set up by statute. So Congress may want to weigh in now to let you know we want an ambassador on gender issues. So if we don't have that close working relationship, it's going to be very difficult to get an agreement on how this committee operates or the Appropriations Committee operates consistent of what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, first, Senator, we welcome the input at all times on the wishes of Congress, what your priorities are. As you point out, we have a large number of special envoys, special representatives. I think there's some 70 plus of them. What we have done is, obviously, those that are required by statute, we've left incumbents in place if they wanted to continue. So all of those that require us to have someone in the job, some people are double hatting. They're doing two jobs at this point. But we've left this alone. As I said, it'd be very easy to go ahead and just tell you, look, we're just going to collapse all of this into bureaus. But that would be prejudging an outcome, and I'm trying to get input on this.
Well, so understand Congress and previous Congresses have spoken on these by statutes. But we've had traditions here of strong support for particular functions. I agree with you that needs to be looked at. But if you do it in isolation of working with us, we're going to have a collision.
We have no intention of doing it in isolation. I hope I'm trying to give you a sense of where we are in the exercise.
My concern is the train is leaving the station in regards to the appropriations bill and the authorization bill, and your process won't conclude a lot of these issues until after those trains have departed. We've got to get better input as to your thinking as we move through this process.
Well, I think that perhaps the difference in how we're thinking about this, and not just what people think about things differently, the effort that we're undertaking is to institutionalize change so that it stays, and we capture now and forevermore these
I think I understand.
I understand we're working a fiscal year budget, and I know it's hard for people to know where to fund.
We want to give you the authority you need to run your agency as efficiently as you possibly can. There's no disagreement. How you put a spotlight on different priorities is something that Congress has some strong views. That's why we welcome that. That's why we set up these special agencies.
We welcome that.
Let me just ask you quickly, any corruption priorities in the budget? I had a hard time finding, as the budget was submitted, a commitment to fighting corruption, which is something that we talked about during your confirmations hearing and you were pretty committed about. Am I missing something?
Well, in all of the, in particular, whether it's in development areas or in law enforcement areas, we have looked carefully, in particular, at countries of particular focus. We have done our best to preserve our ability to continue those efforts. For instance, in the Triangle country areas of Central America, through the initiatives there and other initiatives that we're working collaboratively with the Department of Homeland Security and others to maintain our efforts towards strengthening law enforcement, strengthening the judicial system, strengthening the court's ability to prosecute corruption, because we've made progress down there and we do not want to lose that momentum. So we have looked in particular areas of the world where that has been a priority, and we see the opportunity to capture lasting gains. We're trying to make sure we don't give ground to any place that we have current efforts underway. But we are looking at also ways to execute on that mission by bringing others in, seeking other contributors, finding other ways to enable that.
In regards to the Paris Agreement, you heard my opening statement. Did you change your view on that, or is this a matter that was just a political decision made by the administration?
My view never changed, Senator, from what I shared with you. It was run through an interagency process. I would tell you that the President was quite deliberative on the issue and took some time to come to his decision, particularly waiting until he had heard from European counterparts in the G7 on it. So my view didn't change. My views were heard out. I respect that the President heard my views, but I respect the decision he's taken for the regional
I appreciate
team.
that. That's pretty clear, and I can understand. I want to ask one more question, if I might, and that is, as you heard from the chairman and from me, we've reached an agreement in regards to a Russian sanction bill that will be considered on the floor later this week. We had deferred committee action pending your input as to whether there was any positive progress with your discussions with Russia as to either their reductions in their affirmative attacks on our democratic institutions, their views in regards to Syria, their views in regards to Ukraine. Is there any positive message that you can report back to us?
We have a large placement called issues with the Russians. You just cited a number of them. As I've said, our relationships at an all-time have been deteriorating further. Our objective is to stabilize that. We are working in a couple of areas in particular to see if we can establish that there is a basis for reestablishing some type of working relationship with the Russian government that is in our interest. There are efforts underway in Syria specifically. Those are, I would say, progressing in a positive way, but it is far too early in the process to say whether they're going to bear fruit.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.